talked about sex tapes, frankly, and about the need to suppress them.
I'm amazed that this guy is willing to show his face in public right now when he was nothing but a washed up spy.
You want to talk about president's sons who are involved in businesses with foreign countries? Well, I'd like to introduce you to Hunter Biden. You're a complete political hack and grifter. Was the Hunter Biden hard drive Russian disinformation then, if you're such an expert?
Welcome back to Rattlesnake TV, guys. In this video, we are going to watch the author of the Steele dossier, Christopher Steele, get absolutely nuked into orbit by Natalie Winters of the War Room. So we're going to get into the details of the Steele dossier, which is an important part of one of the biggest political scandals of the century. But first of all, we'll watch Scott Horton debunk some of Christopher Steele's initial claims, which are just pure cope, trying to act like the Steele dossier was not just a big crock of politically motivated bullshit. So with that, let's get into it.
Let's be blunt. You know, your dossier caused a firestorm, obviously, when it came out. It was funded by Hillary Clinton Democrats and other political opponents of Trump, leaked by BuzzFeed News just before he was sworn in as president for maximum potential damage. And, you know, as you know, because you penned it, it contained a number of incendiary allegations, not least of which the one that the Russians may have held blackmail video of Trump engaged in, very unsavory activity with prostitutes and so on, which he's emphatically denied and for which no other evidence has ever emerged. Do you accept, Christopher Steele, that you're part of the problem here in the credibility that people attach to anything linking Trump and Putin, because so much of that dossier to this day remains unproven and much of it has been widely discredited?
I don't believe it has been widely discredited. I would agree that some of it's been unproven. I mean, when you dig into the real detail of this, if you look at the Mueller report, for example, and we're going to go down into the detail a little bit here, there was an exchange of emails between somebody called Rusteladze, who was working in Moscow for Agalarov, and Michael Cohen in, I think, October 2016, in which they talked about sex tapes, frankly, and about the need to suppress them. So I think there's more to this, Piers. If you actually look down into all the detail of the Senate report that was published, which deals particularly with Manafort and Kilimnik, and the Mueller report, as I say, which contains details, and you go back into things like the Sunny Isles deal and the Trump Tower deal and so on, there's a lot of here that isn't really understood and isn't played up. And one of the issues with the whole collusion thing is that collusion is not a criminal offense. And many of the investigations, particularly the Mueller investigation, was simply looking for criminal evidence, for criminal prosecutions, and not at the wider intelligence picture.
Just a quick reminder, guys, don't forget to violently assault that like button if you're enjoying it. And if you want to join this community, I would be honored if you would subscribe to the channel. Let's get back to the clips.
I have 75 pages in my book. I hope you're enjoying it, Pierce.
I've got it here. Provoked.
Oh,
here it is. There's a little plug for you. How Washington started the new Cold War with Russia and the catastrophe in Ukraine by Scott Horton. A big, meaty tome.
Yes, well, I hope you're enjoying it. I do have 75 pages on Russiagate in the end, including a section on the Steele dossier there. And everything that he said about Manafort and Page and all of these people in the Trump campaign were absolute lies. In fact, an FBI lawyer even was convicted for censoring the CIA memo to the FBI saying Page works for us as not an agent, but an asset, a loyal American patriot who always debriefed the CIA anytime he met with an important Russian businessman or government official. And this liar framed him essentially for treason. And by the way, his primary sources were a Russian named Danchenko, who had been under investigation for being a Russian spy in the past. And the only reason they had dropped is because they mistakenly thought he left the country. And then his partner, an American named Dolan, who actually was a registered agent of Russia. And they were the two primary sources who made up all those lies that you and I just recited, Pierce, that made it into Steele's dossier that they used. And none of it was true. Not the hacking of the DNC, not the Alpha Bank, not any of the Steele dossier. I'm amazed that this guy is willing to show his face in public right now when he was nothing but a washed up spy who hadn't had contacts in Russia for years by the time that he published that pile of lies. It's incredible.
Okay, so straight off the bat, check out this Ukraine award in the back of Steele's shot. This is an award that he received in 2017, which is the Ukrainian Order of Merit from the Ukrainian government. The award was given to him in recognition of his service in helping out Ukraine in their conflict with Russia, particularly with his work as a researcher and analyst on Russian intelligence and their activities in Ukraine. So this guy is pretty deep in the establishment or the deep state. Just how deep, we're not 100% sure. But who is Christopher Steele? Christopher Steele is a retired M16 spy, which is British intelligence, and he is responsible, obviously, for the Steele dossier. This is an infamous report that is famous for being a total crock of bullshit and an attempt to frame Donald Trump with election interference, saying that the Russians interfered with the 2016 election.
The Russians and their influence on this election season and what they're trying to plan now.
So at the time of this, he was basically a retired British spy. And this is why Scott Horton said that he hadn't had contacts in Russia for years at this point. And so after his time in intelligence, he went out into the commercial sector and started working on jobs collecting intelligence as a subcontractor. Now, the idea of the Steele dossier was that Russia had some compromising information on Donald Trump and that he was compromised and doing the bidding of the Russians. But it then came out that actually Hillary Clinton's campaign funded this dossier.
Crooked Hillary Clinton. And believe me, folks, she is crooked.
And this was the reason that the FBI was able to get a surveillance warrant for Trump's campaign.
Based on new information and intelligence we've gathered here at Fox, we can report the memo states that a high-ranking law enforcement official told the House Intelligence Committee in a closed-door session that the Bureau would not have obtained a surveillance warrant for Trump campaign aid without the controversial dossier funded by the DNC and Clinton campaign. We also understand the memo states the FBI and Justice Department, in their application to the highly secret surveillance court known as the FISA court, used media reporting to lend credibility to the dossier that was compiled by the opposition research firm Fusion GPS. What's key here is that Fox has previously reported, based on British court records, that former British spy Christopher Steele briefed 6 American media outlets on the dossier and the allegations against then-candidate Trump. So this does appear to be circular reporting that was used to lend credibility to the dossier.
And this is verified that the Clintons funded it, as you can see by this article. They were even fined for it, but never charged with anything, though. And what's more is that they knew that it was bullshit the whole time. And the main source of intelligence, a man named Igor Doroshenko, admitted to this in court.
Thing that I found very surprising from this motion to dismiss was the revelation in court pleadings by the Danchenko team that the FBI knew the Steele dossier was total BS in January of 2017. I just want our viewers to pause on that for a second. You now have the source, the #1 source of the Steele dossier, pleading in federal court during a criminal investigation of him, telling the world and the judge, essentially under oath, that the Steele dossier was BS, I was its main source, and I told the FBI that in January of 2016.
Now, ironically, the claim that they're making in the Steele dossier is that this was election interference. And obviously, the Steele dossier and the fact that the Clintons funded it is blatantly election interference. And then you look at the 2020 election, and the Hunter Biden laptop was a similar story. The FBI doing the bidding of the Democratic Party to try and ruin Trump's campaign. And obviously, if that hadn't have happened, then the most popular president in history, Joe Biden, with the most votes in history, might have lost. And Vivek Ramaswamy details this.
But this idea of Russian election interference in particular, let's trace the history of that in each of the last 2 elections. Let's go to 2016. The allegation of Russian election interference to support Donald Trump, when you double click on that and look at what was the actual foreign election interference there, it was actually U.S. election interference in the U.S. election through the Steele dossier, but laundered through the narrative of actual Russian interference. And actually there was a Russian intermediary to perpetuate that attempt at election interference about Trump's Russia collusion hoax. That's in 2016. Now we get to 2020. Again, domestic election interference is the systematic suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story. That didn't happen by Russian companies, it didn't happen by the Russian government. It happened by U.S. social media companies acting at the direction of deep state actors in the U.S. government that suppressed probably a story whose suppression changed the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. But again, what did they say? They said, no, this was Russian disinformation. So now you're seeing a pattern. In 2016, there's domestic attempts at election interference, but they run it through a Russian smokescreen. In 2020, there's domestic election interference, but they run it through a Russian smokescreen.
Anyways, one of the most bizarre parts of this Steele dossier was that they claimed that the Russians had compromising footage of Donald Trump from a trip to Moscow getting peed on or getting his bed peed on by a bunch of Russian prostitutes. Very bizarre stuff.
Is there one key source you had for this report?
There wasn't one key source, I would say. There was perhaps one key collector.
What's a collector?
A collector is somebody who obviously works for us directly, is paid for us directly, doesn't necessarily have direct access to information, but knows people who do.
You can't name this person, but you met with this person in a European city relatively early on?
Yep.
What did you learn in that meeting?
The contents of Report 080, I think it was, which are well known to the world.
It's the, for want of a better word, this is the P-tape.
That's part of it, yes.
What did he tell you?
He relayed several sources, information, sub-sources, information that related to that event.
In the Ritz-Carlton Hotel,
Correct.
2013.
Yep.
And it's very difficult to prove something didn't happen.
Did you believe his denial?
Honestly, never thought these words would come out of my mouth, but I don't know whether the current president of the United States was with prostitutes peeing on each other in Moscow in 2013. It's possible, but I don't know.
And Trump's response to this was nothing short of absolutely hilarious and all-time classic.
Dossier by Hillary, right? She hired some guy that admitted, I'm sorry, it was fake. How about going home to my wife on the shower, the golden shower, they called it. And I had to explain that to our great First Lady. I had to explain. They said, sir, they said, when you were in Russia. Well, I was there for so short a period. And they said this thing with the golden shower. And I said, I didn't care about the other stuff. The other stuff was, nuclear. I didn't worry about that. The golden shower was a problem for me. And I said to our great First Lady Golden, she said, nope, that one you didn't do. See, I'm a germaphobe. She said, that one you didn't do. So she knew immediately I had no problem there. I said, whew, that was a close one. That wasn't good.
That is a compelling defense if I've ever heard one. And people like Trump deranged lunatic James Carville are still saying this. This video is not from 2016. This is from this week.
So there's got to be a unified theory that explains everything. It fits into one thing. And of course, we know what that theory is. There is a P-tape or an equivalent of a P-tape. I cannot tell you it's exactly a P-tape, but the fact that the Russian, that Putin specifically, has something on Trump, absolutely. And if you see that, then everything else is explained.
Okay, so with all of that context in mind, let's listen to Natalie Winters of Steve Bannon's War Room commit a homicide right before our eyes.
Natalie, what is your reaction to all this?
Well, I know Christopher Steele probably wanted to go down in history as someone that colluded with the Clinton campaign to take down President Donald J. Trump, but I really think that you represent probably the ultimate grifter in the American political space. For you to even come on here, obviously you're trying to sabotage what President Trump is doing when it comes to Russia and Ukraine, but to sit here, what is it, nearly a decade after you tried to smear President Trump as a Russian asset, to then say, well, I think he's a Russian asset, but even though I'm really good at my job and create all these intelligence reports, it's just sort of a feeling that I have. I'm sorry, what stones do you even have left to turn over to try to corroborate your claim that President Trump is a Russian asset? You what? Weaponized FISA courts, surveillance, warrants, not just domestic spy agencies, international spy agencies too, the entire DNC apparatus, a bunch of political operatives and registered foreign agents here in the United States. The American people would really appreciate it if you would stop injecting your efforts to curtail and totally tank the America First movement by smearing anyone who doesn't want to get involved in forever wars or continue the needless and ceaseless dying of in Ukraine and in Russia, just so you can sit there from your nice perch and just continue to defend the globalist world order by continuing to fan the flames of conflict in Russia and Ukraine. And you know what? The same people that you ally yourself with here in the United States, you think you're so good at gathering intelligence. Last time I checked, it was the 51 intel agency officers, spies, who said that the Hunter Biden hard drive, which I've reported on firsthand, it's legitimate. You want to talk about president's sons who are involved in businesses with foreign countries? Well, I'd like to introduce you to Hunter Biden, right? When those 51 people that I'm sure that you know all too well, you were probably likely involved with the drafting of that letter, said that that was Russian disinformation. Well, it turned out that that was true, and shame on you for the last decade trying to inject the idea that smearing President Trump as a Russian agent or a Russian asset is somehow going to tank the MAGA movement. It's about putting America first, and the fact that you can still sit here and you have no actual evidence beside one random Russian meeting and, oh, we need to just continue to get more evidence. You're a complete political hack and grifter, and I wish the American political scene didn't have your voice in it.
All right, well, Christopher Steele, you're about to leave us because you're only here for this part of the panel, but your response finally to that?
My response is that I'm a professional intelligence officer and an expert on that part of the world. I'm not a politician.
Was the Hunter Biden hard drive Russian disinformation then, if you're such an expert?
Let him finish. Let him finish.
So I've been a loyal and close ally of the United States for probably most of the last 40 years. I've worked extremely closely with officials working for administrations, both Republican and Democrat. I have a very strong US client base for which I've worked and produced information over many years, none of whom have ever made any such allegation against me. And it's palpable nonsense to claim that I'm in hoc with politicians.
I'm so glad the Clinton campaign didn't say that about you.
Well, I never worked for the Clinton campaign. I never had any contact with the Clinton campaign. That's the reality of it.
Oh, you're a subcontractor.
I think Fusion GPS would beg to
I
differ.
produced a report for a partner firm in Washington, and the results of that report made me as an ally of the United States, as I would have expected an American counterpart to do, to report back in what I had found to the contacts I had in the FBI at the time.
Okay.
That was the right thing to do, and I'm proud that I did.
Well,
All right,
we're
going to leave it there. Look, I think everyone's had their say about
I'd love his expert opinion.
Let's leave it there. I want to move on to other subjects.
Look at this smug prick's face when Natalie Winters is absolutely cooking him. He doesn't care that his whole work with the Steele dossier was total bullshit. He's just an ideological actor. He got paid good money for that, and he knows that it was bullshit the whole entire way. And him saying that he didn't work with the Clinton campaign, that's like me hiring a private investigation company to do some private investigating, and then the person who actually carries out the investigation saying, I never worked with Jake. The Clintons funded the dossier. You did the dossier. You were a subcontractor for the Clintons. Anyways, that was an absolute tongue lashing by Natalie. So she's doing some great work down at the War Room there. Fantastic podcast. And guys, that's it from me today. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you would like to. And also, if you would like to watch another video, you can click right here. Till next time, I'm Jake. This is RattlesnakeTV, keeping you armed and dangerous.